I pissed off a lot of people when I made this video, so I'm here to do it again. Did you know that Maslow's hierarchy of needs might actually be the appropriation and misrepresentation of the teachings of an indigenous tribe? You see, when Abraham Maslow was 30 years old, he needed to test a theory of his that social hierarchies are maintained by dominance of some people over others. And to test this, Maslow arrived in Siksika to meet the Blackfoot tribe. And immediately they started proving his theory wrong. He found stupidly high levels of cooperation and very minimal inequality. Everyone had enough food to eat and had very high levels of life satisfaction. In fact, Maslow estimated that 80 to 90% of the Blackfoot tribe had a quality of self-esteem that would only be found in about 5 to 10% of the American population. Maslow had found a place where self-actualization was the norm. To define self-actualization for you, Maslow described it as the desire to become more and more what one is, to become everything that one is capable of becoming. Now, Maslow wanted to find out why this was, so he decided to seek out the people in the tribe who were unusually successful. So he started with the wealthiest members of the tribe. And then he discovered something really weird. Quote, "For the Blackfoot, wealth is not measured by money and property, but by generosity. The wealthiest man, in their eyes, is one who has almost nothing because he has given it all away." Giving away one's property and possessions was what gave someone within the tribe security and prestige. Side note, here's a funny quote of what Maslow thought of the white people who were living nearby. "The more I got to know the whites in the village, who were the worst bunch of creeps and bastards I'd ever run across in my life, the more it got paradoxical." So now Maslow had seen the positive deviants in the community, the unusually successful. Maslow now wanted to look at the negative deviants, people who were committing crimes, and what the tribe might do to those people who break the law. He wanted to see how the tribe was going to deal with this without the social dominance of one person to another. He found that, quote, "When someone was deviant, they didn't peg them as deviant. A person who was deviant could redeem themselves in society's eyes if they left that behavior behind." So Maslow's like, okay, so maybe it's like them raising their kids. Like, how do they treat their kids? And he found that the children were also treated as equals within the society, which, you know, to an American in the 40s, seeing this, wild. And despite the fact that these children were given pretty much complete freedom, they listened to their elders and they served their community like everyone else. Now, if we look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we can see that self-actualization is at the top here, meaning that in order to get there, they need to have all these other things fulfilled. Maslow is asking, how do we get to self-actualization? How do we earn it? But for the Blackfoot tribe, self-actualization wasn't earned. You were born with it. The Blackfoot people saw self-actualization as innate, and when you do that, you are trusting them to express the best version of themselves to you rather than making someone the best version of themselves. So for the Blackfoot tribe, we immediately have to switch self-actualization and physiological needs on this pyramid. Now let's talk about these three at the bottom. Maslow witnessed that in the Blackfoot tribe, things like basic needs, safety, and conditions for the expression of purpose was seen as a community responsibility, not an individual one. This is where Dr. Cindy Blackstock comes in. Dr. Cindy Blackstock refers to this responsibility as community actualization. Over here we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and over here we have Cindy Blackstock's First Nations version of this pyramid, but we're gonna get on to why maybe a pyramid wasn't the best choice for this. Before we do that, let's look at the top of the pyramid. Many First Nations have created formal and informal ways of transferring wisdom from elders to youngsters, generation to generation, to ensure that they are able to continue to support community actualization and self-actualization. Cindy Blackstock explained, First Nations often consider their actions in terms of the impacts of the 7 generations. This means that one's actions are informed by the experience of the past 7 generations and by considering the consequences for the 7 generations to follow. Blackfoot scholar Billy Wadsworth says that Maslow did not fully situate the individual within the context of community. He says that if Maslow had done so, the model would be centered on multi-generational community actualization versus on individual actualization and transcendence. So up here at the top of the triangle, we have the passing down of knowledge. But now let's talk about the problem of the triangles. Triangular models like these suggest there's a place we start meeting our needs and a place where we finish meeting our needs. Do we always need to follow the same route? because Maslow himself admitted there were many exceptions to his rules. Human needs aren't hierarchical, they aren't independent, they are interdependent and holistic. Physiological needs don't always come before love, for example. This can be proven by soldiers going to war and willing to die for their country. There is another model. There is another way. Enter Terry Cross. Remember that stuff I just said about needs being interdependent and soldiers going to war? That's Terry Cross, baby. He's a Seneca First Nation member and a psychologist, and Dr. Cindy Blackstock decided to try and represent his ideas in a different diagram. This one! This diagram takes into account the fact that, depending on the situation, the order in which our needs have to be met is changeable. It takes into account that our needs are often related or can be experienced simultaneously. Maslow noted that in a hierarchical society, most people do not have their needs met. Here's another quote from Maslow. "Since in our society basically satisfied people are the exception, we do not know much about self-actualization, either experimentally or clinically." Because in a hierarchical society, everyone individually is responsible for their individual needs. But Maslow had discovered that for the Blackfoot people, basically satisfied people was the norm, where the community was the responsible party for meeting the needs of its members. So why didn't Maslow publish that? Well, one suggestion from Dr. Richard Katz, a personal friend of Maslow's, was that if he had published the Blackfoot teachings, he might have risked dismissal because of the racism. Plus, we know that challenging mainstream worldviews is dangerous. Look at Galileo. Before I round up this video, I'm gonna leave it with a quote from Lakota medicine man John Fire Lame Deer. "Before our white brothers came to civilize us, we had no jails, therefore we had no criminals. You can't have criminals without a jail. We had no locks or keys, and so we had no thieves. If a man was so poor that he had no horse, teepee, or blanket, someone gave him these things. We were too uncivilized to set much value on personal belongings. We wanted to have things only in order to give them away. We had no money, and therefore a man's worth couldn't be measured by it. We had no written law, no attorneys or politicians, therefore we couldn't cheat. We really were in a bad way before the white men came, and I don't know how we managed to get along without these basic things which, we are told, are absolutely necessary to make a civilized society." Dripping in sarcasm. I love it. If you want to know more about everything that I've spoken about in this video, go and check out Teju Revilichan's article on this. It's incredible. It's where I got all this information from. All the sources are listed at the bottom of the page. I would really recommend it. It's a great read.